problems in America aren't just in America. There may be different scale, different type, but they're here. We have a range of our own issues to resolve as well. And whilst being busy dealing with a once-in-a-century pandemic, I don't stop being black just because I'm here and a politician. And so that matters to me just as the job matters to me. So you can't unpick who you are just because you have a really significant job to do at a really important point in time.
You've spoken before about your parents' experience of racism, but what about your own?
I wouldn't say that every day of my life that I was subject to racist abuse growing up. We had quite a protective childhood, I'd say. But then, I said before, my father was a vet in a rural community, so he was a figure that people were used to looking up to. We had lots of good friends at school, but there were still comments made by people who were occasionally people you played with as well. And then as you got a bit older, it got a bit more serious. And I'd certainly say that in secondary school more than primary school, there were more comments. And, things you can't say on camera.
What can you say? Could you give us some sort of idea?
All right, so there's an playing sport was often when things came out, either within school or certainly playing against other schools. And one of the things I remember is I'm playing rugby, I've got the ball, and the other side say, get the nigger. But I'd actually say, compared to other people, that there are other people who have had much worse experiences, but you can't deny it's part of your own experience of growing up. And as you get older, moving through the school system, going outside it, being more aware of the fact that you are different from other people, more aware of the fact that people look at you differently.
Are you aware of that?
Yeah.
Even now?
Yeah. It's funny, Dan Diath, the Lord Mayor of Cardiff, just finishing his term this year, he talked about turning up at events and people assuming that he was security. I can't tell you the number of times through my 20s, and certainly into my 30s as well, where I've gone into a place and people assume that I work there.
You've been a lawyer, you're a politician, you're a minister at the centre of dealing with this pandemic. Do you still sometimes feel that you're on the receiving end of racism in one form or another?
Well, it's sometimes the way people perceive you and the things that are said. Some people often want to define you in a way that isn't about you as an individual, it's actually about you as a collective representative. So, are you a black politician, or are you a politician who is black? And I started out by thinking, well, you should be a politician who is black. And yet actually, there has to be space to be both. There are times where I should be a black politician, because that's the reality of your own experience. And I still feel that I'm very aware there are still stereotypes that exist, and in particular that stereotype being an angry black man. And I do know that I consider what that looks like, and there are times where I deliberately rein myself in because I don't want to appear like I'm an angry black man. That's how people see you, and it'll take away from the message. And do people think that you're being prickly or difficult or angry, or do people think you're being robust? And the way that being robust and assertive is seen is often as a positive. Being prickly and difficult often isn't. And the danger is that and this is one of those things about self-censorship, is that it can get to the point where you worry so much about people wanting to accuse you of being keen to play the race card, as opposed to, well, I'm saying this because this is who I am and it matters to me. We've had a bit of that recently, of course, with the whole reparations debacle and the non-apology, but I spoke about that because I was really angry, not because I was a politician trying to land a blow, but because actually it matters to me, and I'm black every day of the week. I don't just choose to be like this at a convenient point in the political cycle. Politics
can be brutal. You've been a politician at the top level of politics, and I'm sure you won't mind me saying that sometimes perhaps we'll use the term played politics. Does that always explain what you're talking about, or is there something else going on?
No, I don't think it does explain that, because where's the space to be honest and to say, look, this really is who I am, this really is how I feel. This isn't me trying to take a platform to try and gain half a point in an opinion poll. This actually is just how I feel. It's the life that I've lived and the experience that I have, the good and the bad parts of it. And the whole thing about as you grow up and as you do different things and the way people see you changes, sometimes that's negative, sometimes it's positive. From experiences of people seeing you go into work and saying, I want to be like you. And I'd never set out to say, I want people to see me walking to work in my suit and I want them to say that's what I want to be like. But you have experiences when I've been a school governor, of comments from classroom teachers about wanting to say it's positive you're coming in and children talk about you once you've done reading with children, ask what you're doing, just as there's the negative side of it. And other people want to say you are only doing this to use the colour of your skin to try to gain advantage. And so you're stuffed either way. If you talk about your own experience, you get criticism for it. If you don't talk about it, it's why are you being silent? Why don't you be honest about who you are and where you come from?
Were you worried about doing this interview?
Only marginally, because I think it's more important to want to explain where you come from and why, and the different challenges that you face other people don't need to consider. In many ways I'm fortunate, aren't I? I've had a good life, I've worked hard, I've been successful, I've been a lawyer, I was a partner at a law firm, I got elected, I've been a minister for a number of years now. But that doesn't mean that I don't still have those same challenges in perception. It doesn't mean that everything is fine for everyone else that looks like me, because it really isn't.
And just to be clear, you're not saying that you can't be criticised or you can't be challenged for instance, your handling of the coronavirus response. That's not what you're saying.
No, far from it. I expect to be challenged and criticised and questioned. I do quite a large number of media interviews. I've been doing a weekly press conference as well as other interviews through the pandemic, and I enjoy most of my media engagements actually. So I expect to have to answer questions because it's a hugely important issue. That's part of the deal. But it's still something about how do you then get to be described? And, on social media, since Black Lives Matter and the statement I made, there's been a lot more filth on my social media timeline. On the one hand, I'm a target, but I don't have the same experience a lot of my constituents do and people around the country. It can be exhausting, frankly, having to re-explain yourself all the time.
You feel exhausted?
At times. And, to have to justify why you feel a certain way and to have to explain that this isn't, again, the point about this isn't just playing politics. This really is who I am, and I really do feel offended by things that are said, the way that other people feel able to re-describe experiences and to try, it's almost having to turn around and to use your own colour as a weapon against you. And that is unpleasant and that's difficult.
And what about the government of which you're part? How do you rate what it's doing to change the situation?
Well, I think there's a real commitment, and there's the honesty of commissioning the work that we have done with not just the work on PPE that Keshav Singhal led, but also the work of Professor Ogbonna and the team in that report.
That report that you mentioned also talked about structural and systemic racism and disadvantage. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, we know that's the reality of what modern life in Wales is still about. There's no point pretending that things are perfect, because it's all the way, if you don't recognise you have a problem, how on earth can you resolve it?
But the reason I highlight that is because the problem has been the responsibility of your party, Labour, for 20 years that it's been in power.
So for 20 years, we've done a range of things. We've tried to make more improvements. We know there's much more to do. That is both our responsibility in leading this government, to be honest about what more we need to do, to be honest about what we need to do, and then, of course, there's a shared responsibility. So the UK government still has a big role, and some of the language I'm referring to that is problematic comes from the current Prime Minister. I still think it's a problem that he never apologises for all the offensive things he has said on matters of race. And it also comes about us making choices as well. That's I think part of the point about the current Black Lives Matter movement and the moment we're in is it's a time for all of us to be more honest about the choices we make and about how we see other people, and to realise the impact the choices we make have on other people.
And you have a role in that, as not just as a black man, but as a minister in this government. You have a chance to change things. Do you think you're going to get that chance?
I think we will see more change, but you always have to be honest about, is it enough? And what more do you need to do? You know, I think the danger is you have a moment and people says, we did something, but you then look back in another couple of years and say, well, how much really did change? So it's good to see people taking a knee and taking it seriously. The statements matter, but it's then the action that comes from it. So within my own area here in the NHS in Wales, if you look at our staff numbers and the makeup of staff, there's actually a higher proportion of black and Asian origin staff in the health service than in the population at large. But if you then look at the managerial and the senior managerial levels, you actually see a much whiter organisation. So we've still got real challenges about why that is. 'Cause it's not a new workforce in the sense that hasn't been the shape of our NHS for a very long time.
Are you able to change that as a minister?
Yeah, I think, definitely the choices I make and the leadership choice and the indication you give is an important signal for the service. And it's something also the Chief Executive of NHS Wales, Andrew Goodall, has spoken about as well. So the leadership matters, because if you're silent, well, why would you expect it to change?